You're a podcast guy. You've done over 100, it looks like. Now, tell me, how does it fit into your business development ecosystem?
How it fits into my kind of broader scale of content. I want to be as helpful as I can.
You want to be as helpful as possible. Tell me, what has the podcast done for you?
I now have this library of content where if somebody's like, I'm going through this, blah, 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 I can say, oh, episode 75. It's positioned me as an expert.
That's such a great example of how to use content, not just for getting leads, but also to position you as an authority. All right, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So I know you run your own podcast as an agency coach. Before we talk about your podcasts and dive into that, I do want to hear a little bit about what you do, who you help, just for some context.
Yeah, sure. So I primarily work with owners and leadership teams of marketing, advertising, creative, branding, web development, etc. agencies. Basically any business that operates on an agency model. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I've been in the agency space my whole career, having had my own agency that I grew through an acquisition and then exited from through a sale. So I've been on both sides of the M&A process, and I help agency owners get clarity on their goals and challenges and help them build a plan on how they can overcome said goals and challenges.
And you're a niche guy, vertical and horizontal. Tell me a little bit about that.
I say vertical or. So it definitely depends, is always the great answer. Whenever somebody's like, how should I do this? Or should I do this? It depends. I do believe in vertical niching, and I believe in a limitation of services. I think agencies spend too much time trying to be all things and losing money on just not having a process around, let's try this because clients got money waving in front of us.
Did you get into niching when you bought the agency, or is that something already on your radar? You know, when you bought the agency and then you sold it, tell me about that journey a little bit, because not everybody gets into niching.
Yeah. So probably about 2 or 3 years after I launched my agency, we acquired another agency to grow just by bringing on their book of business. It further watered us down as like we worked for everybody. And I had a coach at the time who saw how just clunky my biz dev process was. Shiny object, go over here, go to the Chamber of Commerce, go to this event, pretend to be an expert in whatever plastic surgery one day and manufacturing another day. And so he convinced us, like, you got to pick a few and just play in that space, and also cut out a couple of services. So that's kind of what we did. And we spent about a year or two doing that. It's got to happen slowly and over time. And it was a force multiplier for us in growth and streamlining client acquisition. And, our sales cycles were cut like literally in half.
I'm a big fan of that. Gotten coaching similar to that over the years, and been in programs actually similar to that. And then the book I read that reinforces that is Built to Sell by John Warlow.
So a buddy of mine, shout out to Mike Doyle of Drive 180. Literally, I was a couple years in and I was working with a coach, and this coach had me part of a mastermind group, and this dude, Mike, was part of my group, and he was like, oh, you should read Built to Sell. And I happened to have been going on a solo camping trip that weekend. I'm not a great reader. I'm not a big reader. If I bring a book, it's an emotional support book. I'm not typically reading it. And I read this whole book in a weekend, and I got back to the office on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was. And I said to my team, big change is coming. And so whenever I went on vacation, they knew I was coming back with like a whole new set of plans and ideas. And so it was a game changer. Great book.
Yeah, I tell people it's the top 3 book recommendations. Sounds like you're in the same boat. How it changed your trajectory, I should say.
So if that's top 3, what are the other 2?
Build a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and the E-Myth by Michael Gruber. I don't know if I have one in particular order. It just really depends on the person's situation. But one addresses why you need to move from a freelancer mentality to my agency mentality, E-Myth. One addresses how to really get people's attention with your messaging, Story Brand. And the third, the one we just talked about, is about how to position now that you are thinking as a business asset versus a freelancer, how do you actually scale it as a marketing agency? And that was a big one for me years ago. Similar story. Read it. I think I listened to the audiobook, and huge difference in terms of how I started thinking about niche. And it's not easy just because you say I'm going to niche, right? It's a process. And we could talk about that, but this is a content marketing podcast. We have to talk
about content marketing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you're a podcast guy. You've done over 100, it looks like. I was looking at your podcast and talking to agency owners and things like that. Tell me, what is your podcast all about? What's like the premise?
So it's called Agency Bites, BYTES, because it's small bites of agency expertise. And so I bring on a guest who's got an area of expertise that will help an agency owner move the needle in one way, shape, or form. Last week was about content marketing. I've had people about like RFP responses, legal stuff, ADA compliance, and then slash also I really love giving voice and platform to agency owners who have overcome something like really heavy mental health, minority owned businesses, female owned businesses. Like, let's talk about inspiration and give people a platform and a voice for that. So that's what it's for. It's targeted towards agency owners and leaders. And we try and get it all done in under half an hour.
Now, tell me, how's it fit into your business development ecosystem?
I hate writing content. And so frankly, when I launched this, I saw my peers like putting out like content, and I was like, oh, I got to do that, don't I? I have to do my marketing. I was like, oh, I'll have a podcast, because why not? Everybody's got podcasts. More so, here we are 3 years later since I launched the podcast. Everybody's got a podcast now. 3 years ago, it was fewer everybody's. But so I started planning it in a Google Doc, and it sat on ice for a year because imposter syndrome and all that, And then one day I was like, F it, let's just go. And I had a list of people that I knew I wanted to start having as guests. I had no idea about the format. I'd listened to other podcasts, obviously, but I called up one guy and I was like, hey, you want to be my first guest? And he said, sure, let's go. So
yeah, it just started with the people you knew. Kind of, it sounds like your smaller circle, closer circle.
Yeah, people I knew or knew of. And at that point I was asking like, hey, do you know of anybody that would be a good fit? And, now there are services knocking on my door literally every day with poorly matched people that they think would be a good fit because they're paid by booked meetings. But, I've had some amazingly just smart and talented and amazing people on there. But so how it fits into my kind of broader scale of content and marketing and biz dev, my goal is I want to be as helpful as I can. And so I would imagine if there was 120 episodes of just me talking, people would get pretty sick of it.
It really depends on your model. I know there's Josh Spector in my network. I don't know if you know of Josh, but he does that. I think he does a form that takes questions and answers them in a podcast format. But it depends on how you do it. Like, that's a good way to do it, right? Taking people's questions and answering them in a podcast format.
There's an evolution that I see where, I keep a running list of agency issues and challenges and things that I talk through with clients, and I anonymize it and I dump it in this massive Google Doc of like things that people are facing. And so there's kind of a parallel version that I'm kind of brainstorming now, not necessarily live here with you, but like in general of like, can I also like do shorts, like under a minute or two of answering and talking through some of these challenges, or is it better long form content? And it's the algorithms are the game, and I don't know them really well, and I don't want to jukes them. I just want to be helpful.
You want to be as helpful as possible. Tell me, what has the podcast done for you? Are there any kind of measurable results to be able to achieve with it, or anything anecdotal?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things. One is that as I'm working through something, either in a Slack group of agency owners or via email or even on LinkedIn, I now have this library of content where if somebody's like, I'm going through this, blah, 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 I can say, oh, episode 75 was really good at helping answer this. And, Justin, pointed to ways that you can work through whatever that challenge is. So to me, having that library is really valuable, but it's positioned me as an expert, which is awesome because that's kind of the goal. And so I've had a couple of times now people reach out and just totally skip the discovery process or, initial conversation to say, hey, I saw episodes 1 and 3 or whatever they are, and really love the way you approach coaching. I have an agency. Can you coach me? And like, here's take my money kind of thing.
That's such a great example of how to use content, not just for getting leads, but also I want to point this out, to position you as an authority on the topic. No one has to go searching around and asking for references. They can literally see the guests on your podcast who they look up to potentially. And then the other thing you mentioned was leveraging your content as a tool for building relationships and being helpful. And I would argue that's the age of sales we're in. If you don't have useful content to give people in the moment when they need it, or even before they need it, people remember that. And that's how that's how I use content as well. I really like that you mentioned that.
A guy I really, really look up to. I'd like to be able to consider him a peer in the agency coaching space, but he's far, far beyond where I am because he started so much earlier. But he's hands down the most helpful guy in the world, I think. And Carl Sakis is his name. And anytime we're in a conversation on Slack or a Zoom call in a group or whatever, he's dropping a link to an article. He's got 800 articles on his website, things that he's written. And he's a great writer. He's really smart, really to the point. And so I take inspiration from that. Like, I'm not a great writer. I don't like writing. Some people love it. He loves it. David C. Baker loves it. Like, these other coaches love it. And so for me, it's like, I can't drop an episode, an article link, but here is a podcast link. And so I think there's value. I would love to be able to, maybe I need to figure out a way to track those links and see if people are clicking on them and actually listening. Or does it not even matter? Is it really the effort and the energy that I'm putting out?
If it's just you, probably not. I certainly wouldn't myself. But, if you have a VA or an assistant of some kind, you can, hey, go put these all through a Bitly and get them all and then track them once a month and we'll see what's getting, what's getting clicked on.
But I will say that ROI, like most of my one-on-one clients stick around for, my minimum one-on-one engagement is 7 months. Most of them stick around for about a year. Many of them stick around for up to 3 years. And so I know one of those, I guess there's been 3 now that have reached out. I guess the combined ROI is probably 6 figures.
That's a pretty good return on time and investment because, you're editing.
So yeah, I have a VA that helps me with editing. And so he does all the production and I do the writing for it and get it posted. So it's a pretty good workflow we have. Big fan of workflows, and we use some automation on a Trello board to kind of track the cards.
Well, that ties in beautifully to the next question is like, we talk about the strategy, you're leveraging this for authority, for to be helpful with your community, with your network, even in sales calls, you're actually getting leads. But the question is, how do you make this happen? Let's dive into the nuts and bolts a little bit just to get behind the scenes look. Use a Trello board, anything else in your tech stack?
Calendly I use for scheduling, and it prompts people for give me your bio, all your social links. What are some things that we could talk about? Like point me in the direction of where the conversation can go, and what are some relevant events that have happened in your life since we spoke. I don't think I've ever jumped onto a blind podcast without meeting somebody first, even for a 15-minute chat. Make sure that we have aligned energies and there's a good vibe there.
Have you ever jumped on one of those and then decided it wasn't a good fit?
I have.
Because I don't do that personally. I look at the form, the Calendly form, like you did, and then look at the words and stuff, and I make a call from there and say, hey, it's not a good fit. But tell me about that. What did that look like for you?
For me, it's an honor to be asked to be a part of somebody's content. And so I didn't feel like I wanted to kind of snuff that out. You know what I mean? And it's only been 1 or 2. And so I'm like, there's valuable information there. And it's not like this person is stomping on puppies' heads. So it's not like they're an evil person. It was just more like I just didn't feel like the conversation flowed and I was really forcing it.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to carry it. I found that, I don't know if I've quite had that in this podcast, but I do try to be pickier on the front end. I think all of us as podcast hosts, we try to be pickier. For somebody's that company, big or small, is thinking to get into podcasting, what's a lesson you've learned you'd pass on? Definitely do this or definitely don't do that.
So I use Podbean to distribute to all the platforms, and I really like that. I use Riverside to record, same as you. I really like that. I will say that I have been completely and totally delinquent in making clips, and it's the lowest hanging fruit and the biggest miss, I think. And I've got, 120 episodes, half an hour each. So I've got 60 hours of content that I totally missed. And so start day 1, and I'll tell myself this, even if you missed day 1, start at day 120 and make some clips and just put them out there. And it's the lowest hanging fruit, and I stink at it.
Well, what about your VA? Can't he do that?
I need to give him the timestamps. Right.
Well, have you thought about using an AI to help with that? Like an Opus? Riverside does it too.
I've tried both. I'm not in love with them.
Not excited. I know they're a start, but they're not quite. You always need a human.
So even the magic clips that Riverside makes, I'm always adjusting them. They're close. Even during a conversation, I'm hitting the M key on the keyboard to say, I've marked this spot for me. Then it's a matter of me going back and of the 6 that I marked in that episode, telling Dennis like, hey, I want to use, timestamp to timestamp. And then, yeah, he could easily do it. Then I'm the publisher. So I do need to leverage more, so I'm not the bottleneck there. That to me, that's like the biggest miss that I think people need to make sure that they're doing.
That's good. That's good advice. You're saying I'm not doing this, so make sure you come up with a system to do it. I'm trying to think, what is my system? We use Asana. We don't use Trello, but when we move the task along, there's a column. Hold on, let me pull it up. There's a column called, for my content lessons with Justin podcast, you can see interview scheduling, pending, headshots, bio, show notes, all that's my stage. I have a team of like 4 or 5 people that each have a role here. There's like the editor, we have a QA person, we have a content writer who names it, and we have another guy who publishes it. And then our designer also does the thumbnail and social post. And then it goes over to publishing and then files shared with client. That's my VA shares it with the client. And then it's done. You can see all the ones promoted on social media. And these are all rules automated. So when somebody's done, they click, they move it over, automatically assigns it to the next person. I don't know if we do deadlines automatically, but we do assign it automatically. And it's up to the person to assign the deadline to the next person.
So this is a service that you provide for your clients. So you have this system built in because it's got to be efficient for your client delivery, and you're able to treat yourself like a client as well with the same SOP and efficiencies, which I love. When you're creating titles, are you running it through anything to make sure it's like SEO-ified or?
No, we're not doing, going back to our conversation about the bit.ly links, like there's always that one more thing. We could do this. And you got to just, at some point I found, you just got to be like, no, maybe someday, write it down. Maybe you'll come, the ideas are nonstop in the world of marketing now. It used to be pretty straightforward. You either get the newspaper ad or you don't. What size do you want? Quarter page, half page, full page. Now with digital marketing, you know how it is. It's always one more thing. So we don't quite do that. But it's interesting, by doing this podcast with folks like yourself and others, I have learned better practices. And one of those we just started implementing was creating 2 thumbnails, one for YouTube that has just their image and my image, but also the exact same one, but now add the logo for the podcast Content Lessons with Justin, and add something like watch it on YouTube. And we don't use that one for YouTube. We use that one to give to the guest to promote, and for us to promote if we do anything like that. We usually promote with the clip, but yeah, they can have a static image because we're already creating the thumbnail. Just create one that's also a promotional image. That came from Greg Wasserman, who I interviewed a few weeks back. He's like, you should do this. He's like a podcasting guy.
Yeah, we created a number of different thumbnails, and this most recent iteration of the design, I took myself completely off of it because, again, I'm looking at the grid and I'm like, I'm on 30 thumbnails and I don't need to be. I want it to be about the guest and their expertise and their knowledge. But I do see a lot where it's like the host is really small and then the guest is much bigger, or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, there's different variations. I haven't really done too much in terms of like studying best practices. At the end of the day, you get a lot of liberty as a graphic designer, and I'm a former graphic designer as well. Like what you think your audience wants. I started adding myself. I went the other way. I was just having guest photos on there. And I was like, wait, if they're adding it as a promo image to their LinkedIn, I think I should be on there too, to build that familiarity, right? Who's this Justin guy?
Yeah, no, I get that also. Ryan, you had just mentioned, has been sharing, I give access to the raw Riverside footage to the guests if they want it. Some people will use it and cut it up. Ryan's been posting some clips up on YouTube or LinkedIn and talking about what we're talking about. And I love that. And if it's going to be a marketing tool for them, I'm like, here, take it. These are the assets we created. They're yours too, man. Party on. I want people to get as much life out of it as they can, especially because I'm just letting it sit on ice.
Yeah. Yeah. The promotion part. Yeah. And it's funny seeing everybody promote it a little bit differently. Some don't do anything. Some do a ton. They want more assets. We just do one short typically in one image, And
the other tip I'll give that I did probably for like the first 60 or so episodes is I went back through, and I don't like being just kind of one time you're on my show and we never speak again, but a lot of the people I try to build relationships with and reach back out to. And so I just did like a quick, care to reshare post campaign. And there were personal emails, hey, Justin, just as a reminder, you've got these assets that you can use. You can cut them up. Here's a link to the episode. Here's all the assets. Here's the graphics. It's been 3 months since you've been on the show. Maybe you want to reshare it to your network.
So it's like leveraging an asset to just stay in touch and remind them it's helping them. promote themselves.
That's the goal. I want to help them get the info out there. And if you think about how our networks expand over time, there's a good chance there's a chunk of your new network that didn't see what you posted 3, 4, 5 months ago.
Unbelievable how often that's a whole can of worms right there. Like how many people don't see what you think they're seeing. It's unbelievable. Like you can point, underline it, and hey, did you notice this? I've been realizing that again. You know, kind of when you have realized something and you realize it again, and then you realize it in a bigger way. That's one I've been having recently. Is like how freaking often you have to repeat yourself because people just don't. You know, people are busy. We're all doing our own thing. So
yeah, the worst is when they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that's what you do."
Oh yeah, that's the most frustrating thing. You've been doing something for 5 years. Hey, that's how content solves that problem, folks, especially short form. If you're publishing content consistently or a podcast and you're sharing it top of mind and you're talking about what you do like we do in this podcast, that should happen less, theoretically.
There you go. I teed you up for that one.
I appreciate that, Steve. All right, well, see, where can people learn more about you?
AgencyOutsight.com or on LinkedIn. Agency Coach is my handle on LinkedIn.
All right, beautiful. Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Great chat.